Thank you for stopping by at the Movie Marquee. Our podcast reviews well-known movies and contains spoilers. The podcast may contain mature subject matter and mature language. Listener discretion is advised. Enjoy the show.
Quiet on set. Places, everybody. And action.
Welcome to Drive-In Double Feature. We are back with our second movie in our Kevin Smith double feature, Mallrats. I'm your host, Ken, and I love the smell of podcast in the morning. With us is Ted.
That kid is back on the escalator.
And the other gentleman over here is Eric.
My grandma always said, why buy the cow when you can get the sex for free?
Eric, what do you have on Mallrats?
Well, Mallrats was released on October 20th of 1995. It's starring Kevin Smith, who also wrote and directed the movie as Silent Bob, Jason Lee as Brody Bruce, Jeremy London as T.S. Quint, Shannon Doherty as Renee Mosier, Ben Affleck as Shannon, the proprietor of Fashionable Mail, Jason Mewes as Jay, Claire Forlani as Brandy's Venning, and Joey Lauren Adams as Gwen Turner. This movie had a budget of $6.1 million. It was his movie right after Clerks, so now he had the big budget movie house behind him. The film only grossed $2.1 million at the box office, and unfortunately, it was considered a failure. But in the upcoming years, Mallrats has become a cult classic ever since it was released on video.
So even though it was a financial failure, what did the critics have to say about Mallrats?
The critics had ups and downs about this movie. So unfortunately, Rotten Tomatoes had it certified rotten at 56%. You need 60 to be fresh, but the audience loved it at 82%. Some of the reviews here. Alex Orner of Common Sense Media said, this is one of Kevin Smith's best films. It's driven by mature dialogue and bizarre characters. Jason Lee is outrageous. His character's outlandish monologues provide the majority of the laughs. He gave it 4 out of 5. Now, Caroline Westbrook at Empire said this film has bawdy humor and disjointed narrative. It makes it an acquired taste only. She only gave it 2 out of 5 stars. And the New York Times reviewed said it's a loser and more ordinary of a movie, Hollywood style, as compared to Clerks. A lot of these reviews are comparing this movie to Clerks. Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times unfortunately gave this movie 1.5 stars out of 4 stars. And he had a very interesting review of this. I'm going to read you a little clip of it here. He's referencing, obviously, Clerks in this review as well. He said, Clerks spoke with sure, clear voice of an original filmmaker. In Mallrats, the voice is muffled, and we sense instead advice from the tired, the establishment, the timid, and other familiar Hollywood executive types. The year that Clerks played at the Cannes Film Festival, I was the chairman of a panel discussion of independent filmmakers. Most of them talked about their battles to stay free from Hollywood's play-safe strategies. But Kevin Smith cheerfully said he'd be happy to do whatever the studios wanted if they'd pay for his films. At the time, I thought he was joking, hence why he gave it 1.5 out of 4 stars. Back to you, Ken.
That's interesting because Roger Ebert was a huge fan.
He loved Clerks.
Kevin Smith.
Loved Clerks. Loved the independent Clerks movie.
He really, really was a driving force behind Kevin Smith. That is interesting. And that's definitely there's some things there that we'll be bringing up later in our discussion of the movie as far as, I guess, quote unquote, selling out.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about selling out, Ted, you have the plot summary for us.
I do. Mallrats is the story of 2 best friends in their early 20s. T.S. Quint is a college guy who is in love with his sweetheart, Brandy Svenning. T.S. has been planning a getaway to Florida where he intends to ask Brandy to marry him. However, before they are to leave for the airport, T.S. finds out that Brandy has to be a last-minute fill-in for her dad's TV game show because the main contestant has died. T.S. overreacts to this news and is paranoid that it is just an excuse for Brandy's dad to break them up. Brandy is shocked that T.S. would say something like that and breaks up with T.S. for good. Brody Bruce is an underachieving comic book collector with no real direction in life. His girlfriend, Renee, has become very disillusioned by his constant lack of motivation for anything that doesn't revolve around comic books or video games. After another morning of being ignored by Brody, Renee dumps Brody. T.S., heartbroken and angry, goes to visit Brody to let him know about the breakup. Brody, hearing this, tells TS that he and Renee have broken up as well. The two decide that the best way to cope with the loss of their significant others is to go to the mall. Upon reaching the mall, TS and Brody discover that the game show Brandy's dad is producing is being conducted in the mall. In an attempt to get Brandy back, Brody and TS decide that the only way to do this is to stop the TV show. Brody and TS enlist the aid of Jay and Silent Bob. Jay and Silent Bob agree to help TS and Brody in stopping the TV taping. While shopping and hanging out at the mall, Brody discovers that Renee has moved on with another man, Shannon Hamilton, who runs an upscale men's clothing store in the mall. Brody tries to win back Renee by having sex with her in an elevator. She says that the gesture is too little too late and tells Brody that they are still broken up. A dejected Brody tries to pick his mood up by going to the comic book store, but there's an autograph signing by Stan Lee. Brody is not allowed in the store because of the fears that he will make a scene in front of Mr. Lee. TS and Brody are escorted out of the mall by the security staff that Brandy's father has hired for the TV show. Brandy's dad also tells TS that it was indeed his plan to break up TS and Brandy. After being kicked out of the mall, TS and Brody go to a rundown mall to get their fortunes read. TS believes that the fortune that they receive means that he must go back and get on the TV show to get Brandy back. Brody and TS sneak back into the mall and get backstage of the TV show with the help of Jay and Silent Bob, who couldn't stop the taping. Brody, now inspired to get Renee back, has a plan as well and procures a sex tape of Shannon Hamilton having sex with an underage girl. He plans to get Renee back by showing the tape to Renee and everyone after the game show. Jay subdues two of the contestants of the game show and TS and Brody get on the show. TS and Brody ruin the TV show, but in the process, TS convinces Brandy that he loves her. He asks her to marry him, and she says yes. After Brandy accepts TS's proposal, Brody then confronts Renee and Shannon with the evidence of Shannon's crime, and the police take Shannon away. And then Renee gives Brody another chance. Seeing how funny Brody is, the TV executives decide to give Brody his own talk show, and TS and Brandy get married in Florida after all.
Well, thank you, Ted, for that detailed plot summary there. So, guys, let's talk about Mallrats. What was your first introduction to this movie?
I saw this movie for the first time on video in the late 90s and loved it ever since.
This was a movie that I came to on video as well. Because I loved Clerks so much, I started looking for all of the different Kevin Smith movies. It was a natural progression to go to Mallrats. It's a movie that I loved from the first time I saw it. The characters connect with me.
I actually saw Mallrats before I saw Clerks. When it came out on cable, I believe for whatever reason, Mallrats was constantly on cable and Clerks was not. And so that was my introduction actually to the Kevin Smith universe was Mallrats. And it was on all the time. So I would probably watch this movie like constantly over and over and over again. I was probably like 23 at the time and my life consisted of going to work, going out to karaoke and other bars and stuff and coming home at 1 o'clock in the morning to Mallrats.
You lived a very fruitful life.
Yes, karaoke is very fruitful.
Essentially, you were kind of like Brody.
Pretty much.
Except for malls, I hung out at karaoke bars.
Cool.
Interesting.
What do you guys like or love about Mallrats?
I love practically everything about this movie. I can watch this thing over and over and over again and find new things to like every time with it. The lines, I think, hold true. I use them in real life. It is probably my top 2 favorite Kevin Smith movies of all time. And I can't really say anything bad about it.
Nothing bad about it?
No, nothing bad about it. Try me.
Our podcast.
I'm drawn to the characters because I love Brody. Brody's probably my favorite Kevin Smith character.
He's my favorite as well in this.
Because he seems the most real. Whereas when we were talking about Clerks, Dante and Randall kind of seem, ironically enough, like either caricatures of people or a combination of people, whereas Brody actually, to me, comes off as a full individual person. He's a funny character. When we were talking about Clerks, that I liked Randall and I could be friends with Randall. Well, I could be Brody because Brody is hilarious. He's an endearing character, even though he's goofy, whereas some of Kevin's other characters are more just of a caricature of themselves. But the other thing that really gets me about this movie, I love the extended dialogue. I love that Brody tells a story. So I connect with him on that because I can be kind of a storyteller like that. I love his extended dialogue sequences. Like the sequence to start off the movie where he's talking about Walter and putting the cat up his ass. It's hilarious. And I think that's one of the things about Kevin that I really like. And that's where I think there's a comparison to with Quentin Tarantino is he allows the dialogue to go further and doesn't cut it like some other directors tend to. Take a scene from Pulp Fiction where Jules and Vincent Vega are talking about the foot massage. That's something that other directors would have cut out. And I think there's this very similar with Kevin Smith, where there are dialogues, or monologues, I guess, is what they would be considered because it's just Brody talking, where he goes through and it's extended. And most directors would have cut it completely or chopped it up so it wouldn't have been nearly as long. But it really does leave an endearing part to me as for the character. And I think that's one of the things that really lends itself to me.
I enjoyed the Brody character a whole lot more than Randall. I mean, they're both smart-ass type of characters, but there's something about Brody that's genuine, in my opinion. He's a good guy. He has his quirks. He is a little bit lazy and stuff. But like where Randall is kind of mean-spirited to mostly everybody he meets, except for Dante. Brody is, he could be friends with everybody, except for the manager at the fashionable male store.
Yeah, except for Shannon Hamilton.
I just wanted to see Jason Lee in these type of characters the rest of his life. He just does a great job with Brody, and I believe this is his first major role. You think he'd been acting for a while because his acting compared to, let's say, Jeremy London's, even Claire, his acting to me is more natural than those two who have been doing it longer than he had.
I completely agree. It's amazing that he was a skateboarder, and for him to make that transition, I think Jason Lee, because we talked about him also too when we talked about Almost Famous, he's best when he's given really good dialogue. Have always been a Jason Lee fan. I think he's hilarious. I think he's hilarious in real life too. If you ever watch an interview with him, he's genuinely a funny guy. But I completely agree with you. The Brody character, he's just fun. And it's interesting, too, because he kind of plays a similar character in Chasing Amy, too.
He does.
Because I really love Jason Lee and Ben Affleck in Chasing Amy.
Now, I think the difference between Jason Lee's character in Chasing Amy versus Mallrats is I feel that he's obviously it's a later movie, and you can tell that he's grown up a little bit more. You know, he's now the tracer for the comic books, and
right.
He doesn't have that high pitched sarcasm that he says to every phrase that's out there, like in this movie, which I think is the funniest part of his character is his high-pitched sarcasm, over the top, how he just completely melts down and overreacts about every little situation, like
yes.
the escalator. I mean,
that kid.
Yeah, back on the escalator. Yes. Kevin Smith's writing was perfect for Jason Lee. I could not think of anyone better in that role.
You look at the discussion about the food court.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's like a perfect example of what you're saying, Eric. This is a battle here about, is the cookie part of the food court, or is
he's taking it personally?
Yeah. Here's the question. The cookie factory that they went to, is that part of the food court, or is that what did he say? He said there was a place for snacking.
Yes.
An autonomous snacking venue or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Venue. So what's your take on that?
Oh, why would I go against Jason Lee? He knows better than anyone.
Exactly.
It's his mall.
Right. It is not part of the food court, so therefore it is its own establishment.
Yeah.
But for somebody who says that this is his mall and he loves this mall, he does seem to miss out on a lot of things that are happening at the mall. He doesn't know that there's a game show going on. He doesn't know that Stan Lee, an idol of his, he's at the mall.
I think they purposefully kept that a secret from him because they knew how he would freak out over. That's what I took from it.
Yeah, he would just go completely off his rocker there, Stan Lee.
To start talking about the thing.
Right.
And then you talk about Stan Lee, that's his biggest role to date. Well, he's not with us anymore, so I guess he won't get any bigger roles. But Stan Lee actually comes off, he's usually a cameo, but this is actually a part for Stan Lee, and he actually doesn't do a bad job.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, his last cameo in the Marvel Cinematic Universe was in Spider-Man Homecoming, and amazingly enough, as a nod to Kevin Smith because of his support for the MCU, Stan Lee's on the bus with the Spider-Man character, and he's reading the Mallrats script.
That's not Spider-Man. That is Captain Marvel.
Oh, that's right. Is it?
Yes, because she gives him that kind of like a little wink a little bit and not acknowledging Stan Lee. Man, I broke up almost crying when I saw that wink because he had already,
right.
I think
I
he
thought
had
it was
passed away at that time.
All right, so let's re-record that then.
No, I like to tell you when you're wrong.
I thought it was Spider-Man Homecoming.
You're fired.
All those movies start to blend together at some point. There's only 27 of them.
Yeah, it's like Fast and Furious. It's all the same damn movie.
Hey, I like Fast and Furious. It's a guilty pleasure. I like cars.
I like cars too.
But it is a great little scene there in Captain Marvel. And yes, when he's reading the script from Mallrats, you just get a little bit like nostalgia. When you've watched Mallrats and you appreciate Mallrats and you see that in the Captain Marvel film, you can't help but get a little teary-eyed a little bit.
Yeah.
So what else do we like about Mallrats?
Besides the acting, I liked everything about the movie. Can we talk about things we didn't like?
Sure, because I was going to when you said acting, I was about ready to say acting there. But go
wow. Right. Well, obviously on the extended version of the movie, which is a train wreck.
Yes,
you want to talk about going out in 100 different directions.
Yeah, and Kevin didn't even like that.
Not apologized.
Yeah. When Kevin Smith was giving out an award, he actually did apologize for Mallrats in general. And I think that's a little extreme because I think the movie is really good.
But then he was kidding afterwards, I think.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things he says you can't take seriously.
Yeah, true. But you're right. The extended version normally of a movie is something that I really relish.
This is almost a different movie altogether.
It's not good. I'm glad that he doesn't care for it because I like the movie as he cut it.
So, talking about cutting it, I really appreciate the editing of this movie. When you do watch the extended version, how they had to go back and fix this movie. The only problem with this movie that you could tell definitely is earlier shot where T.S. is visiting Brandy to pick her up to go to Florida, and T.S.'s hair is much longer in that scene compared to everything else. It looks like everything is like nicer, like it might be summer, whereas everything else in the movie looks like it's fall. Besides that, I think being able to edit everything together in that way was very good. You talk to Brandy's dad doing the game show, and he's talking to the TV executives, and they said, hope you don't have a mess up like you did over at the governor's
ball. Yeah, the governor's ball.
Yeah.
That's the only line in there that references it.
Right. So there's stuff that you can see that was previously in there, but it doesn't affect the movie at all.
You wanted to talk about things that we like about the movie before we go into things that we didn't like. Michael Rooker as Brandy's dad. He is awesome. I like Michael Rooker in pretty much everything he does. He played the brother in The Walking Dead, even in like Days of Thunder. Everything that he does, he just brings a level of professionalism, and he's just really a good actor. I really liked him here.
I enjoy him here, and he had recently done Tombstone, I think, before this movie.
Right.
Somebody was working on this picture that convinced him to take this part as the father, as the Lex Luthor of comic books. He shaves his head off. I guess he tried to put some gray in there to kind of make him look a little bit like older and stuff, and it didn't work out. So he shaves his head, and so now he's got the bald look like Lex Luthor, and so basically he's the evil guy here. The other Tombstone reference that you hear is from his stagehand, his like second in charge.
Roddy.
Played by Scott Mosier.
Mr. Svenning's executive assistant.
You called down the thunder, and now you got it.
That's from Tombstone?
Yeah, it's from Tombstone. So there's a lot of Tombstone references here. It was a very popular movie at the time.
And references are always something that I love with the Kevin Smith movies as well. I love the constant Batman references throughout Mallrats. It hits really close to home. I especially love when Silent Bob has shot the thing up and they escaped from LaFour's, and Jason Mewes goes, where does he get those wonderful toys?
Yes, exactly.
That hits real close because I'm a huge Batman fan, and Batman has always been my favorite universe as far as comics go. So having the Batman references is really awesome for me.
That's a high point in my movie is Jay and Silent Bob. And more so than any other movie, I enjoy Jay and Silent Bob because they remind me a little bit of, and this is giving very high praise because Ted especially knows how much I love the Marx Brothers, but it reminds me of Chico Marx and Harpo Marx. Especially
They
the
do.
part where they're running and Kevin Smith all of a sudden goes into that full fast mode where he's passing everybody by. Well, Jay's being chased by the security guards because he knocked the security guard over the head with a baseball bat, and so he's being chased by them.
Kneel to Zod.
Zod, yeah.
And
There's
Kevin
a
Smith
Superman reference. Yeah.
Yes.
and Silent Bob is running, and he like blows by everybody. He's running so fast.
Right.
And that's something that, I feel like because of his character being so silent, it's also a nod to Harpo Marx. But then they go into that area where they're trapped. They have to use the bat hook to get up to avoid being captured. But before that, he's pulling out a vibrator.
Yes. Inflatable woman.
And that's Harpo Marx right there.
Is it?
Harpo,
I don't remember that in the Marx Brothers. But okay.
Yeah, Harpo would have all these things in his suit, and he would just pull them out at random.
Right. It's very, very funny humor like that.
It is.
Yeah, and Jay plays the kind of Chico part where he's kind of a smart guy. He got these lines, and the relationship is close. And if you ever watch the Marx Brother movies, it's always Chico and Harpo that's always together. Same here with Jay and Silent Bob. That's the highest praise I can give for these two characters. The only issue I have with Jay and Silent Bob is they're perfect in this situation. I think when you do have the fuller movies later on, like Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, and then the reboot, it's too much. They are great as the comic relief. I don't think it sustains full movie.
Yeah, I would agree. They're not the stars of the movie. And yeah, even in the reboot and Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, where they are the stars, I think in those movies, a lot of the other cameo appearances by people really make the movie.
Yeah, that's the whole point of the movie. I tend to agree, but I love Jay and Silent Bob. I think that your eyes always go to them. You mentioned the funniest where he's pulling the stuff out and they're running away from LaForce, but I also love where after Brody gets beat up by Shannon
Easter
Hamilton,
yes,
they go after the Easter Bunny.
It's great. Yeah,
that is hilarious because who else would be so singularly crazy than go exact revenge on the Easter Bunny in front of a bunch of kids?
And I just thought the sarcastic wit of Brody just saying the Easter Bunny did it was just great.
Yes, it sets that up perfectly.
The Easter Bunny at the other mall was more real.
The Menlo Park Mall was better, and he flipped out. I mean, it's great. Yeah.
Right.
The kid's reaction to the
yes.
being beat up.
The little girl before bye Easter Bunny.
right.
Yeah.
When they have the plans and the plans are all drawn up like
the Death Star plans, yeah.
The Death Star plans, but then when you look at them, it reminds you of the Wile E. Coyote.
Yes, exactly.
And that's exactly what Silent Bob turns into is Wile E. Coyote, and he always gets foiled by something crazy happens where he runs through and ends up hurting himself in some way.
Not only hurting himself, but he's always knocking into the changing room and basically seeing Gwen changing every single time.
Yeah.
It's funny because Kevin Smith and Joey Lauren Adams actually fell in love on this movie.
They were dating, weren't they?
Yeah.
I like Joey Lauren Adams. There's just something about her. I enjoy her in Chasing Amy, and she makes appearances here and there. Big Daddy with Adam Sandler, and I just always have enjoyed her. There's just something about her that she's kind of like the voice of reason for T.S. and Brandy.
Yes.
It's kind of a big reason why they get back together.
Yeah, she's the link between them.
I also enjoy her a lot, especially in Dazed and Confused and then Mallrats and Chasing Amy. I think she's really awesome.
Going back to the Jay and Silent Bob, this takes place a day before Clerks. My question here is Jay and Silent Bob a different character here than they are in Clerks? Because they're completely different.
It does feel that way. It feels like the Jay and Silent Bob in the mall are actually a little bit more subdued than they were in Clerks. They were really raw and just all over the place. They seem a little bit more subdued, a little bit more reeled in, but still hysterically funny.
This is part of where there has to be a suspension, a little bit of disbelief. But as far as the two characters, I think essentially they're the same character, except in the mall, they have more trouble that they can get into rather than standing outside the Quick Stop.
How about the good old days of being able to smoke in a mall, right?
Wow, yeah. This movie turned into a time capsule in a way because kids today aren't going to know what it's like to hang out at the mall. The mall growing up, that was where we went to hang out. That was everything. Everything that happened at the mall. Because malls are now dying thanks to Jeff Bezos and Amazon, it's kind of a time capsule now.
It's funny that you bring up that malls are dying. This mall that they're using here, which happens to be in Minnesota,
Eden
not,
Prairie.
not in New Jersey, is a mall that was dying itself because the Mall of America had opened up and had taken most of its business away. They were operating at 50% of capacity. That's why they were able to shoot half of the stuff they were able to shoot during regular working hours.
The cost of shooting there was considerably less in Minnesota than it was in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And when I was watching, which kind of just pissed me off, for lack of a better word, is on the extended version, after they leave Brody's house and they go to the mall, he parks the car. In the theatrical, when he parks the car, it's them walking in to the mall, him going, "I love the smell of commerce in the morning." In the extended, it's him parking the car, and then there's a 2-minute scene of them talking and walking through the parking lot. Every damn car has Minnesota license plates on it. And then they walk up to the front, you see Eden Prairie, and you're like, this isn't New Jersey. That was something they probably should have caught. I know it's an error and omission, but that was just something that was on my mind as we're talking.
Going a little early on the error and omissions part, he's saying, "I love the smell of commerce in the morning." It's afternoon. I mean, they talk about later on that he doesn't.
Not to Brody.
Well, and plus two, that doesn't really fit with the Apocalypse Now.
Right.
Nod. So I'll give him a little bit of a pass on that. But here's another little detail. When you watch Kevin Smith movies, there's really funny details. I love all of the names of the stores.
Rug Munchers.
That is
Buy Me Toys.
Buy Me Toys.
Yeah.
The tanning salon's called Burning Flesh.
Yes.
And, of course, Fashionable Male and Popular Girl.
Right.
The extended cut, Brody actually says in that area where Burning Flesh is, that's where he was born. He was born in the mall.
Oh, wow. That's a little extreme.
I'm
glad that got cut out. And then the comic store is called Comic Toast.
Right.
Yeah, but the Rug Munchers makes me laugh every time.
Oh, yeah.
Because, in heart, I'm probably a 12-year-old. So.
Well, I like Buy Me Toys as like a nod to KB Toys.
Exactly, yeah.
Buy Me Toys. That's awesome.
We were talking about earlier about Silent Bob always getting in situations where he hurts himself trying to break the stage. You have that scene where he's looking over the plans and he's about ready to hit a kid that's looking over his shoulder, and the kid walks away, and then later on that kid takes his toy and he rolls it to Silent Bob, so he steps on it and basically causes him to have that accident where he's flying through the mall and hits the changing area. And it's little things like that. I heard that kid though was a pain to work with. I guess he was crying on the set the whole day.
He didn't like it because Silent Bob had a goatee or beard.
Really?
Yeah, I guess so. Here's something else. I don't know about you guys, but of course there's Willem, the character who's trying to look at the magic eyes.
Ethan Suplee's character.
Yeah, Ethan Suplee. I hate magic eyes.
Oh, I do too.
Nobody has ever been able to tell me that they actually saw anything in that crap.
Well, actually, from what I read, that is not a true. I mean, you can't not see a sailboat.
In real life, Ken, I've never been able to see crap in any of those. I think it's a big joke. I hate magic eyes.
In the movie, they say the magic eyes picture that William is looking through, if you look at it on the Blu-ray and you freeze it and you look at it with the clarity, it's not actually a sailboat. If you pause it, it's actually 3 rows of 3D shapes.
Right.
I still wouldn't be able to see it.
I know.
I hate those things.
I do
with
too,
an
man.
Unholy passion.
I'm with you.
And I feel for Willem when everybody else comes up and says, "Oh, it's a sailboat." I feel for him.
It's a schooner.
I can see Ted playing this part.
I feel for him because I've tried so many times to look at those stupid things and I can't see anything. I understand his complete and utter breakdown at the end when Stan Lee finally sees it and it's the last straw for him.
Right.
I completely understand that character because I can't ever see anything in that. I hate magic eyes.
I'm with you.
Ted brings his lunch and his Coke.
All stained shirt and everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just had to toss that in because I can't let this whole podcast go by and not say how much disdain I have for magic eyes. I think it's a big farce.
I think it's funny, though, to watch William's frustration throughout the whole movie. Everybody can see it. He sees the kids, and the kids call it a schooner.
Yeah.
He's like,
Silly bastard.
No, dumb. You dumb bastard. Yeah.
but everybody sees it. You even have Renee's character come over and she sees it and she goes, "Oh, the sailboat."
Calls her Brenda because
Brenda?
Shannon
Yeah.
Doherty played Brenda on 90210.
I didn't realize why she was mad at him for years because I didn't realize that was a 90210 reference.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Here's another thing that I really liked about the movie, too. I love the opening sequence, the credit sequence, because I love all of the different comic books and how they fit the particular character. And in that sequence with all those comic books, of course, the Shannon Hamilton character is named Buttman. And of course, Ben Affleck infamously now plays Batman in the DC Universe movies. I think that's kind of funny and interesting. I love how the comic books all fit the different characters. I had heard that those weren't part of the original credit sequence because Kevin Smith has always been really connected in with San Diego Comic-Con. So they debuted Mallrats at Comic-Con, and a bunch of actual comic book drawers loved the movie, and they drew the comic books for each character for the opening credit sequences.
Okay. That's cool.
Yeah, it's just a cool little touch because it's kind of like a comic book movie.
I want to talk about the acting here because some of these performances are really good. Some of them are very not so good. And then you have Ben Affleck's Shannon character, who Ben is basically playing Ben, in my opinion. So,
Oh, that's a little harsh. I'm glad you did bring that up, Ken, because we weren't going to go off to things that we didn't care for. I don't like Jeremy London in this movie. I don't think he's a good actor. I think his brother is much better. And I think because I like Jeremy London so much in Dazed and Confused, it was a distraction for me that Jason was in Mallrats. His acting is so inconsistent throughout this movie.
So it kind of let you down a little bit?
A little bit.
Yeah.
It's not enough for me to not like the movie, but sometimes when he talks, it's almost
reading
nails
lines.
on a chalkboard.
He's reading lines. You could hear him.
You can tell.
Yeah, you could hear him reciting the lines. That was my problem with Clerks, and I believe Jeremy London is having an issue here with the TS character being authentic. I think the other problem here with these characters is they're not very likable characters. Do you really want to see Brandy and TS together, or even Brody and Renee together? I don't think these two couples should even be together. I don't feel like they fit each other.
I root for Brody just because I like Brody.
Yeah, I like Brody, but I don't like Renee.
No, she's his complete opposite, let's be honest, but...
Yeah.
She's pompous. There's nothing throughout the whole movie that makes me want to like her, except for when they get arrested and Renee goes up to Jay and Silent Bob to try to help save them. But outside of that, she's not likable, and I don't like the Brandy character either. She's very blah. Maybe it's because at this time, Shannon Doherty people were saying that she was difficult to work with. When I watched this movie, I'm thinking, oh, Shannon Doherty is a pain in the butt to work with. They said that she wasn't the best person to work with, but she wasn't the worst either.
Yeah. Kevin had no complaints working with her and actually enjoyed working with her. And she's always been complimentary of working with him and actually wanted to work with him on Dogma. The timing didn't work out. But
Jason Lee said that it was awkward working with her in the scenes that they were together.
I'm sure because she was a much bigger star than everybody else that was in the movie. And Claire Florani, she's good in this movie, but she's not my favorite actress here either.
She's very replaceable. She could be interchanged with almost anyone.
Right.
And the movie wouldn't change one bit.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a part of it too is it's hard to play off of, and I know it's going to sound like I'm really bashing on Jason London, but it's hard to play off of him too. It really comes off like he's reading lines sometimes. Like the whole beginning sequence where they end up breaking up in front of Brandy's house, there are parts of that are just very nails on a chalkboard.
I think the other challenge for her is that, well, she's an English actor, so she has to
Right.
come up with this American accent.
But she did okay.
Yeah, she did okay.
You really wanted a Jersey girl here. You really wanted somebody that you feel connected that she lives in that Jersey area.
Like your Clerks characters. All the girls in Clerks were clearly from Jersey.
Right.
She seemed like she didn't belong there more than everybody else.
True.
Okay, it's not a dislike of the movie, but it certainly is uncomfortable, and for a few different reasons.
Like
and it's not just uncomfortable like the backseat of a Volkswagen. The fact that Trish the Dish,
Nobody
who
calls me
is
that.
who is Alyssa Jones's sister from Chasing Amy, the fact that she's 15, there's statutory rape all over this movie. That is extremely uncomfortable for me now, looking back. But the fact that she's 15 and Ben Affleck is obviously over the age. They admit that it's illegal. I mean, he gets taken away by the cops. But that's pretty extreme for today.
And in what world would a publishing company give a $20,000 advance to a 15-year-old to do
True.
that? I do like the name of the book, Borgasm, the sexual
Borgasm,
prowess
yes.
of the 90s male.
Yes. And they allude to it if you listen to the commentary. There is a scene, I guess, that was either never recorded or was eliminated from the movie. It's alluded to that Trisha and LaFours have some sort of relationship.
Well, he's with her at the end when she's signing the books.
Yeah. That
Oh.
is creepy as hell.
We try to do everything to play this off. Like, does your parents know? Yeah, my parents know about this. I have everybody sign off waivers. Most guys get off on it.
Video, yeah.
This is something, too, because I've learned this through listening to interviews with Kevin Smith. Universal wanted to make, for the 90s, a modern-day teen sex comedy. What Porky's and Meatballs were. I know that some of the topless scenes that are in the movie were basically because Universal pushed Kevin to put it in.
That's crazy because it's usually the opposite. They had more problems with the language in this movie than they did with the nudity.
Right. And especially if we go back to Clerks, where there is no nudity, but yet it got an NC-17 rating the first time around. I don't know where this Trish character became 15. I don't know if that's something that was a universal decision. It's extremely uncomfortable. But then now, after the last 3 years and what we've found out about Harvey Weinstein, even though this isn't a Miramax movie, it's a Universal Gramercy movie, it's uncomfortable. My opinion of the movie, because I take it for what it is, and I think it is funny, but for me, it's uncomfortable. And I don't know how to rectify the whole idea in my mind.
The actress that's playing it, she's definitely not 15.
Yeah, exactly. She was actually one of the people that was going to play her was going to be Jennifer Love Hewitt.
That's what I heard, yeah.
Which that would have been interesting. But
you would have looked 15 Jennifer Love Hewitt at that time.
At that time, yeah.
But here's the thing. Would it made a difference if they would have made her 17 and removed that video at the end where you just have audio? You don't show the video. You just have the reaction of the crowd responding to what they're looking at and not actually showing the video of them doing it.
But the video itself, yes, it's graphic, but it's not graphic. You can take that video with, there could be many things happening. Let's be honest. It's not like it's from a different angle or a different view.
It's still a sex scene, and it's still
clearly, yeah.
24-year-old male and a 15-year-old girl supposedly in that, and you're physically watching. It's almost telling you that you're watching child porn. I would rather them just take that video out and just have the response of everybody else looking at it. I think would go much better.
It might have made it easier to digest, but it's still an uncomfortable part of the movie. Like I said, it doesn't ruin the movie for me or anything. It just is one of those things, looking now through my perspective with 2020 eyes, it's pretty glaring for me.
I'm like, I believe 23, 24 when this movie comes out. It's uneasy for me at that particular time. I'm not much older than you, Ted. You're more of a teenager still when this movie comes out. It probably doesn't bother you as much when you first saw it than it did me, because I'm thinking here at 23, 24, I feel dirty watching it a little bit. It doesn't kill the movie for me, but it is something that I wish they would have made these changes.
I completely agree. It's definitely eye-opening. That's for sure.
Yeah.
That would never have made it into a movie today unless you're doing a completely different type of movie.
On that thought, how does this movie hold up?
That is a great question.
I am confused.
Yeah, I think it holds up for people in our age bracket. I think people who maybe saw this first run or on video a couple years after it came out might be a little less sensitive to it, but I think people in their teens and 20s that watch this, I don't know if they would find it funny.
I agree with you, Eric. This is definitely a Gen X movie because I believe we're all part of Gen X. It's definitely our movie, just like Clerks is our movie. These are our movies. They were made by people from our generation, for our generation. that's where Mallrats 2 finds its niche. Like I said, this is kind of almost like a time capsule. It makes me nostalgic for where do you go when you want to hang out? Well, you went to the mall. Nobody goes to the mall to do that anymore. You don't walk around and just hang out. It's funny because we live in and around Aurora, Illinois, and the Fox Valley Mall looks just like the Eden Prairie Mall. The outside of the mall is very nostalgic for the 90s as well. So in that sense, it really does act like a time capsule. That doesn't change the fact, I think the dialogue and the characters, while they are representative of our generation, I think like a character like Brody stands up. I think you could put Brody in at any time and he still works.
Right, because you still have the guy the slacker, the guy who sits at home with his parents playing video games all day.
Sega boy.
Sega boy. Yeah.
Correct.
I mean, what you're saying with the Fox Valley looking like the mall here in Mallrats, when I first saw this movie, I thought this was the same mall as Louis Joliet Mall in Joliet.
Oh, yeah.
I was convinced for a while that they were the same mall. It looked like the layout was the same. And even when they walked in, I'm like, is that the same store that, when I walk into the mall? There is that time capsule because it reminds you of how the mall looked like back in the early to mid 90s. Yeah, I agree. I think this is a nostalgic type of piece. It holds up with the people that originally saw it when it came out. I've listened to some people talk about this movie that are, 20 years younger than us, and they can't stand this movie. They think it's a piece of crap. They don't think it's funny. They just don't get the references, like the 90210 reference at the end of the movie that we talked about earlier. They're not going to get that because nobody in the last 20 years is watching 90210.
That's very true. It's very of its time and for the people of that time. I don't know how it would connect to future generations of people younger than us because it's people nowadays don't go to the mall to hang out.
The mall's dead.
Yeah, the mall's not a central part anymore of socialization.
But at the same time, we have other movies that are kind of raunchy comedies. You think about Animal House, and people of this generation can watch Animal House and still enjoy it, but there's no frat houses, and there was no frat houses when we watched it. We could say that, but maybe it's because it's hard to relate to the women leads here. I don't even want to be with them. They're attractive ladies, but I would not want to be in a relationship with either one of these two women. It's a male flick. Not trying to say that women can't watch this film. The boys are making this movie, and it's designed for how guys looked at this back in the 90s. I just look at the women leads, and I don't see it.
I think that's a fair criticism from Kevin Smith's writing. Ken, what you're saying, I think especially Clerks and then Mallrats, the women characters are not as developed as the male characters are. I think more so in Clerks than in Mallrats. But I think Kevin Smith redeems himself immensely with Chasing Amy because those female characters are extremely well written for. I don't remember that being a criticism of the time, but I could see that being a criticism because this is Brody's movie. Let's be perfectly honest. As much as T.S. is a main character and is a focal point, the star of this movie is Brody. Yeah, this is Brody's movie. And I mean, this is why Brody continually comes up in the other Kevin Smith movies, is because he's a lasting character, whereas T.S. is not.
Right. You could take T.S. and Brandy completely out of this film, and it's still the same film. T.S. and Brandy really don't bring anything to the table. It's funny because we talk about Brody, and there's the line later on that Brody is T.S.'s sidekick. And Brody's like, wait a second, what if T.S. is my sidekick? Brody should have been the main guy and needed a sidekick like T.S. who's trying to give him fair advice. But this T.S. character, as it's written, useless, just totally useless.
I kind of think that's why that line's funny, is because Brody is the Batman rather than the Robin.
I would actually say that T.S. is more of the Alfred than even the Robin.
Wow, I wouldn't go that far.
No, he's not as smart as Alfred. I don't even know if he's as smart or as funny as Robin is. In my opinion, he's definitely the secondary character to Brody. Because Brody, in a way, is the narrator of the movie as well. He is the driving force of the movie. If there is to be a criticism, too, of the movie, is, like you said, Ken, I think that the focus goes away from the driving force of the movie, which is Brody, to TS really early in the movie, and I don't think that that was necessarily a good decision. But here again, it's not going to change my ultimate view of the movie because I still think it's hilarious.
So what are you guys' opinion about the topless psychic?
I don't think it's really needed. I don't even think it would be in a flea market, if you will. Honestly, I like Jason Lee's, he's so excited at first, and then when he sees the third nipple, he just can't look at it. He's just completely taken back by it. I think his reactions are the best part of that scene. But it's not really needed.
It's not needed, but you're exactly right. This is Universal pushing for nudity where it really didn't need to be. And I know that one of Ken's big criticisms of movies is that unwarranted nudity. And this is a case where it probably is. But I will say this, Jason Lee makes the scene ironically is humorous to me that is what makes TS come to the realization that he needs to go get Brandy back. It's just a complete and utter absurdity that's what causes him to make the mental jump that he needs to go get Brandy back. It's absurdity. And sometimes I think absurdity is funny.
It's interesting you're saying this about Brody's reaction to the psychic, but TS's reaction is just downright stupid. I'm sorry, it's just, oh, you have a third nipple? It's just really dumb dialogue here. As much as Kevin Smith writes really great dialogue, it kind of falls flat here. It's really bad writing altogether here.
Wouldn't it be because it was forced?
It does seem to be forced. Thanks, Ted, for reminding how much I dislike unneeded nudity in a film. But I will say this. I always was confused which nipple was real and which one wasn't.
I always try to figure that out, too.
True.
I'll give them credit there. They had me guessing, and I would be like, I'm wrong again. It's not like I come back to this movie every so often. It's been years since I actually have watched Mallrats. But in that sense, I think it's interesting. Again, another reason why I don't like the TS character. He gets this revelation, and then later on, he takes this revelation, he goes on the game show, and he's a jerk again. He's just a complete jerk to his girlfriend. He doesn't try to do anything really to win her back. He doesn't seem to have a change of direction, a change of heart. He's still the same guy at the beginning of the movie that's ripping on her for being a daddy's girl.
You're right, because in every movie, there's always the hero's journey. And that's part of my criticism of TS, is there is no movement of TS's character. He never earns the relationship at the end. He comes to a realization there with the fortune teller, but he never does anything to actually earn the ending that he gets, if that makes any sense. And I don't think that he does. I think Brody, in a way, does, because he has to get the video and show the video and all of that. That's kind of a Journey-esque type of move where he earns the ending where he gets the girl and Shannon goes to jail.
He even says, though, to her, he says that you have something on mine. You have my heart. He's actually on stage in front of the whole audience, putting himself out there and telling her how much she means to him. Whereas that you're not getting that with the TS character. TS is just all about TS and how it affects TS. He doesn't care anything about Brandy, and I could care less that they get back at the end of the game show. If they do make Mallrats 2 and those two are together, I'm just not buying it.
They keep saying they're going to make it. I mean,
no, there's a script. We are talking in 2020 right now. We're talking during the course of the pandemic where Hollywood has been essentially shut down. Kevin Smith has said that there is a script that's ready to run as soon as Hollywood is up in production again. They will be making, it's going to be called The Revenge of the Mallrats. And he did allude to how this is going to go as far as how everything is going to fit. In Jay and Silent Bob, the reboot, Brody is going to own the comic store that he's owned in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back and then in Jay and Silent Bob, the reboot.
Okay.
He has not alluded to the fact as far as the plot points or anything, but I did hear that there's a good possibility that Shannon Doherty is going to be back in her character, but I highly doubt, based off of the history of everything that's come out about Jason London, I doubt the TS character will be back in any shape or form. I think it will be basically a Brody movie. There's been no casting rumors or anything of that nature right now. That's just pure speculation on my part.
TS and Brandy, they get married at the Universal Jaws thing where he wanted to propose to her. I think how it should have ended was that Jaws should have ate them. I'm sorry.
So much for a sequel.
I hate this couple so much that I just want them eliminated. I just can't stand them. It lowers the grade because of this couple.
Well, I don't hate the couple quite that much.
I love how Brody takes over the game show. I think the whole game show sequence really shows also how good Kevin Smith's writing is when it's on point, because Brody is perfect in the game show sequence. And while TS's character, the reading of it is still kind of iffy at times, because I don't think that the characters played the way it was probably written. But Brody is perfect in that game show sequence. Just as a side note, Gil Hicks is played by Brian O'Halloran, which was Dante in Clerks, because Gil Hicks and then Dante Hicks, they're supposed to be cousins in some way.
Identical cousins.
Right. But I love that whole ending sequence where they're in the game show and how all of that plays out. I do like that. I will even give a pass to TS and Brandy part of the game show. I don't necessarily care for the way Jason London plays the TS character. He comes off more harsh than funny at times, but it's totally made up for by Brody. And I love Jason Mewes' line during the whole game show, where especially after the video's played, he goes, "This is just one messed up game show." It makes me laugh every time. I enjoy that final sequence. I don't know about you guys.
No, I thought the game show played out really well too. I thought them taking over the characters that were supposed to be on it. It was kind of ironic though that Brandy couldn't figure out until like 2 or 3 questions that it wasn't them. Like she wouldn't recognize their voice.
Right. It's like, get to the Brody stuff.
I like it how he's like, call me second suitor.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
One thing I would say when you were bringing up Jason Mewes in this, I really enjoy him in this movie so much more, I think, even than Clerks. He seems to be a little bit more natural here. He seems to be a little bit more at ease acting, it seems.
I agree.
I love the scene with he's giving them pot that basically knocks the other contestants out. They're lying on the floor with all the food.
They got the mad munchies.
They're a couple lightweight.
Yeah, they got a serious case of the munchies. It's funny, and I really enjoy him. And the work with him and Kevin Smith together, they're just the perfect comedy duo for this movie. They saved this movie for me. I enjoy them immensely.
Well, now you said that it saved the movie. Why don't we go into our final thoughts of the movie?
Sounds good. Eric, do you want to lead us off?
This is one of my favorite Kevin Smith movies, right up there with Dogma. It's obviously a 1-2 movie for me. Some days I like Dogma better. Some days I like this movie better. I guess it just depends on the mood. The cast of characters that are in this movie, I think, just work well. I don't hate Jeremy London as much as Ted does, but I do think it is a little obvious that he is reading cue cards or being fed lines. But I think Jason Lee saves this movie from any type of actor issues. I mean, if it was Jeremy London pinned with a different actor, I don't think it would be as strong. Jason Lee makes everyone in this movie a lot stronger, and I think he is by far the leading actor and the best actor in the movie. The cast itself, I love it. I think they all work great together, and I think it's hysterical. I think it holds up well with people of our generation. Yeah, it's got a few things in it that are a little touch and go right now, especially with, Harvey Weinstein and his connection with that. It's a little bit ironic, yes, but people of our age group can relate to this movie as it played in the 1990s. So for me, it is an A all day long.
How about you, Ted? What do you got?
My final grade for the movie is going to be a B, whereas I enjoy Clerks more. Mallrats it's in that next category that's below Dogma and Chasing Amy, which are 2 of my favorite Kevin Smith movies. I enjoy this movie because of Jason Lee. I also love the way Jay and Silent Bob are used in this movie. I think it's hilarious. But I agree. I've said this a few different times throughout the podcast. To me, it's a time capsule. I don't know if anybody outside of our generation, younger than us, is going to find the same humor. It's going to be a difficult go for them. And I don't fault anybody for that, because here again, humor is all relative based off of the person. But it hits in that nostalgic era for me where I remember growing up and having similar experiences as these characters. It always brings me back there, and I can suspend the disbelief. The reason it's not an A is because of the TS character and the Jason London portrayal. It's hard because I love Brody so much, but I can't get over having a main character that falls short like that. I just had an interesting thought because, Eric, you had mentioned that what if somebody else had played it? What if Ben Affleck would have been TS? I don't know if TS would have been so dislikable. It would be a different movie. I'm glad that I like the regular version and not the extended version, which is, it's a complete
train wreck.
Go against everything that I normally am, because I normally love the extended versions of things.
I think we can all agree that the extended version is just not even worth watching.
Right.
It'll just corrupt your mind of this movie.
Yeah, it takes something away, and I'm glad I don't like it. As far as the movie, I highly recommend it. It's funny. Yeah, there are some things that are uncomfortable, but sometimes comedy's supposed to make you a little uncomfortable, and that's where my funny bone lies, is right in that area. That's my opinion of Mallrats.
Well, before I get into my final grade of Mallrats, I wanted to change my grade for Clerks. In the first episode, I had given Clerks a C+. I have downgraded that to a C. And the reason for that is because we're just getting started on this podcast, and the way I grade is basically, if you get into my A area, you have to be a very special film to me. So I decided to change how I looked at Clerks a little differently. And that's based on how I look on Mallrats. So Mallrats for me is a B-. B- is not a bad grade. I like this film. I enjoy Brody, Jay, and Silent Bob very, very much in this. But it is the TS character. It is the Brandy character. Even to a certain extent is the Renee character. I can deal without them. I know we've been giving Jeremy London a hard time, but sometimes it's also on Kevin Smith and his dialogue, because he's very, very adamant about not changing his dialogue. And I think for TS, the dialogue needed to be changed, because if this is how Kevin Smith wrote him, TS is a jerk. He is not somebody that I care about. And I don't think any actor would have been able to make me sympathetic for the TS character because of how he's written. And knowing Kevin Smith and the way he doesn't like people to go off script, I think that this character was doomed from the start. But there are other characters I enjoy. I love Gwen. I wish there was more of Gwen. They get rid of Gwen way too soon in this film. I wish I would have seen her follow through the whole movie, but unfortunately they give up on her halfway through the film, and she's not there towards the end to see how she got these two characters together. So that was a little disappointing. And I agree with Ted on the nostalgia thing. This is a 90s film. This is right in the area where I was going out, coming home, and watching movies if I wasn't working. And I watched tons and tons of movies. And this was one of those movies that I watched a lot in the 90s. I like it. I do recommend people to see it, but also with the understanding that some of the stuff is dated and some of the characters, you just want to kick them in the head. You just wish that Shannon would have beat up on TS instead of Brody, because TS deserved it. So that's our review of Mallrats. Well, we thank you guys again for stopping by to listening to this podcast on Kevin Smith. We hope to see you guys soon. Take care.